Rachel stood in the doorway with her car keys digging into her palm. She'd been standing there for 10 minutes, just staring at the empty parking spot where his car should have been an hour ago. The restaurant reservation was for 7. It was now 8:15. Her phone sat silent on the table behind her. No missed calls, no apologetic texts, nothing. Just like last month when he missed her birthday dinner. Just like the time before that when he forgot about the concert tickets she'd bought 3 months in advance. She walked back inside and grabbed her overnight bag from the bedroom. This wasn't a spontaneous decision. She'd been thinking about it for weeks, maybe months if she was being honest with herself. The bag had been packed since this morning, hidden in the back of the closet. Tonight was supposed to be different. Tonight was their 3-year anniversary. She'd given him one last chance to show her that she mattered, that their relationship mattered. And once again, he couldn't even manage to show up on time. The apartment felt too quiet. She could hear the clock ticking in the kitchen, the hum of the refrigerator, the distant sound of traffic outside. 3 years of her life had been poured into this relationship, into this place, into loving someone who seemed incapable of meeting her halfway. Her best friend had warned her 6 months ago. Her sister had sat her down last Christmas and asked if she was truly happy. Even her co-worker had gently suggested that maybe she deserved someone who actually prioritized her. Rachel pulled her suitcase from the closet and started adding more clothes. Toothbrush, makeup, phone charger. She was methodical about it, not crying, not angry anymore. She was just tired. Tired of being the only one who tried. Tired of making excuses for him to her family. Tired of sitting alone at restaurants, at parties, at important moments. Wondering where he was and why she wasn't enough to make him care about being on time. Her phone buzzed. She glanced at it, expecting another excuse. Instead, it was her mom asking how the anniversary dinner went. Rachel couldn't even type a response. What was she supposed to say? That she was standing in their apartment packing to leave while her boyfriend was who knows where doing who knows what. She set the phone down and zipped up her bag. The sound of a car door slamming made her freeze. She heard footsteps running up the stairs, fast and urgent. The apartment door flew open and there he stood, completely out of breath, his shirt untucked, his hair a mess. He looked at her, then at the bags by her feet, and his face went pale. "Wait," he said, his voice breaking slightly. "Please, just wait." Rachel shook her head. "I'm done waiting. That's all I've been doing for 3 years. Waiting for you to show up. Waiting for you to remember. Waiting for you to care enough to just be here when you say you will." He took a step forward, and she could see something different in his eyes. Not the usual panic when he realized he'd messed up. Not the standard apology already forming on his lips. This was something else. Something that looked almost like fear. "You're right," he said, and that stopped her cold. He'd never said those words before. "You're completely right about everything, but please just give me 1 more minute. Just 1 minute to explain, and if you still want to leave after that, I won't stop you, I promise." She'd heard variations of this before. 1 more chance, 1 more sorry, 1 more promise that things would be different. But something in his voice made her pause. Maybe it was the way his hands were shaking. Maybe it was the fact that he wasn't making excuses, or checking his phone, or acting like this was just another small argument they'd get past. He looked genuinely terrified of losing her. 1 minute, she said, crossing her arms. "And it better be the truth this time." He nodded and did something she didn't expect. He sat down right there on the floor in the entryway, his back against the wall, and put his head in his hands. For a long moment, he didn't say anything. Rachel stood there, bag in hand, watching him struggle with something she couldn't quite understand. When he finally looked up at her, there were tears in his eyes. Real tears. In 3 years, she'd never seen him cry. "I haven't been honest with you," he said quietly. And I know that's not okay. I know I should have told you everything from the start. But I was scared, and I thought I could handle it on my own. And now I'm about to lose you because I was too proud to ask for help. Rachel's grip on her bag loosened slightly. This wasn't what she expected. This wasn't another lame excuse about traffic or work or forgetting to set an alarm. This was something real. Rachel slowly set her bag down on the floor. She didn't sit, didn't move closer, just stood there waiting. Her heart was pounding in a way that felt different from the anger she'd been carrying all evening. This was something else, something that felt like standing on the edge of finding out a truth she wasn't sure she wanted to know. He pulled out his phone with shaking hands and started scrolling through something. For the past 6 months, I've been going to Riverside Treatment Center every Tuesday and Thursday evening, and some Saturdays. That's where I was tonight. That's where I've been all those times I was late or missed things or seemed distracted. Rachel felt her breath catch. A treatment center. Her mind immediately went to the worst possibilities. Was he sick? Was he dealing with something serious? Why wouldn't he tell her? It's not for me, he said quickly, seeing the panic flash across her face. It's my younger sister, Katie. She's 19, and last year she tried to take her own life. His voice cracked on those last words. She almost succeeded. I found her. I was the one who called the ambulance, and since then, I've been the only person from our family who visits her regularly. Rachel's legs suddenly felt weak. She moved to the couch and sat down, her mind racing to catch up with what she was hearing. He had a sister, a younger sister who was struggling, and she'd had no idea. In 3 years of dating, he'd barely mentioned his family. She'd always assumed they just weren't close. She made me promise not to tell anyone, he continued, still sitting on the floor, looking down at his hands. She was so ashamed, so scared of people knowing. She didn't want anyone to look at her differently or treat her like she was broken. And I thought I was protecting her by keeping that promise. But what I was really doing was protecting myself. He looked up at Rachel, and the pain in his eyes was so raw it made her chest hurt. I was scared that if you knew my family had problems like this, you'd think less of me, that you'd see me as damaged or complicated. My last girlfriend, when she found out my family wasn't perfect, she left. She said she didn't sign up for that kind of drama. So when Katie got bad again, when she ended up in treatment, I just didn't say anything. I thought I could keep it separate. Keep you separate from all of that. Rachel sat in stunned silence. Everything she thought she knew about the situation was completely wrong. All those times she'd felt unimportant. All those moments she thought he didn't care. He'd actually been dealing with something massive, something heartbreaking, and he'd been dealing with it completely alone. The appointment times kept changing, he said quietly. Katie would have bad days and the staff would call me, or she'd ask me to come on days that weren't scheduled because she was having a hard time. And I couldn't say no to her. After what happened, after almost losing her, I just couldn't tell her no. But I also couldn't tell you the truth because I'd promised her I wouldn't. He pulled up his phone and showed Rachel the screen. There were dozens of messages, appointment reminders, check-in times, messages from his sister that said things like, "Bad day today, can you come?" and "Thank you for being here," and "You're the only one who doesn't make me feel crazy." There were photos, too. Pictures of them at the treatment center, his sister looking thin and tired but smiling slightly. Pictures of them getting coffee at the cafe downstairs. Evidence of a whole part of his life that Rachel knew nothing about. Tonight was supposed to be different, he said, his voice thick with emotion. I had everything planned. I was going to tell you everything over dinner, come clean about all of it. But Katie had a really bad afternoon. She called me in crisis, and the staff asked if I could come in, and I just ran out the door without thinking, without calling you, without doing anything except trying to get to her before something terrible happened. Rachel felt tears forming in her own eyes now. She'd been so angry, so ready to leave, so convinced that his lateness was about not caring. And the whole time, he'd been trying to hold together someone else's broken pieces while his own life fell apart around him. "I know this doesn't excuse anything," he said. "I know I should have found a way to tell you sooner. I know I've hurt you by keeping this secret. You had every right to be angry. You have every right to still leave. But I needed you to know the truth. I needed you to understand that every time I was late, every time I seemed distant, it wasn't because you didn't matter. You matter more than anything. I was just drowning and didn't know how to ask for help." Rachel wiped at her eyes, trying to process everything. 6 months of secrets. 6 months of him carrying this weight alone. 6 months of her feeling rejected when really he'd been trying to save his sister's life. Rachel didn't know what to say. The anger that had been burning in her chest for months was still there, but now it was mixed with something else. Guilt, maybe. Or confusion. Or just overwhelming sadness for what he'd been going through alone. She looked at him sitting there on the floor, waiting for her to say something, anything, and realized she'd been so focused on her own hurt that she never once asked if something bigger was going on. "Why didn't you trust me?" she finally asked, her voice barely above a whisper. 3 years together, and you didn't think you could tell me something this important?" He ran his hands through his hair, a gesture she recognized as what he did when he was struggling to find the right words. "It wasn't about not trusting you. It was about not trusting myself. My whole life, I've watched my parents pretend everything is fine. When Katie started having problems in high school, they ignored it. When she got worse in college, they said she just needed to try harder. When she ended up in the hospital after her attempt, they visited once and then stopped coming because it was too uncomfortable for them." Rachel felt a chill run through her. She'd met his parents exactly twice in 3 years. Both times had been brief, formal dinners where everyone smiled and talked about nothing important. She'd thought they were just reserved people. Now she understood it was something much worse. "I became the person who shows up," he continued. "The person who doesn't run away when things get hard. And somewhere along the way, I convinced myself that meant handling everything alone, that asking for help or admitting I was struggling meant I was becoming like them. Like my parents who abandoned their own daughter when she needed them most." He stood up slowly and walked to the window, looking out at the parking lot below. "Every Tuesday and Thursday, I'd sit with Katie in that visiting room and she'd tell me about her day, about the therapy sessions and the medication adjustments and the other patients who became her friends, and then I'd come home to you and pretend everything was normal. I'd put on a smile and ask about your day and try to be present, but half my brain was still back in that building, worrying about whether she'd be okay." Rachel stood up and moved closer to him, though she still kept some distance between them. "You made me feel invisible," she said, and her voice cracked on the words. "All those times you were late or distracted or forgot about plans we made. I thought I wasn't important enough for you to care. I thought maybe you didn't love me anymore." He turned to face her, and she could see fresh tears on his cheeks. "I love you so much it terrifies me. That's part of why I didn't say anything. I was scared that if you knew the truth, if you saw how messy and complicated my life really is, you'd realize you could do better, that you deserved someone without all this baggage." "That wasn't your choice to make," Rachel said, and there was still some anger in her voice, but it was softer now. "You don't get to decide what I can or can't handle. You don't get to protect me from your real life by lying to me. That's not how partnerships work." He nodded, accepting the truth of her words. "You're right. I know you're right, and I've known it for months, but I was too scared to change anything. Too scared that telling the truth would mean losing you, so I just kept going the way I was going until I ended up losing you anyway." Rachel walked over to the couch and sat down, her mind spinning. She thought about all the times over the past 6 months when he'd seemed distant, the times she'd tried to talk to him about their future and he'd changed the subject, the weekend trip she'd planned that he'd canceled at the last minute. All of it made sense now in a way it hadn't before. "Is Katie okay?" she asked suddenly. "Tonight when you went to see her, was she okay?" His expression shifted to something that looked like relief mixed with exhaustion. "She's okay. She was having what they call an intrusive thought spiral. It's when her mind gets stuck on negative patterns and she can't break out of it alone. But her therapist talked her through it, and I stayed until she was calm. She's safe." Rachel felt something soften in her chest. Despite everything, despite the hurt and the secrets and the feeling of being pushed aside, he'd been doing something important, something necessary. He'd been saving someone's life over and over again every time he showed up for his sister. "I want to meet her," Rachel said, surprising herself with the words. He looked shocked. "What?" "Your sister. Katie. I want to meet her. If I'm going to understand what's been happening, if we're going to figure out if this relationship can survive this, then I need to know all of you. Not just the parts you think are acceptable. All of you." He stared at her like she'd just said something in a foreign language. "You want to meet her? After everything I just told you? After I kept this from you for 6 months?" Rachel stood up and walked over to him. She still didn't touch him, wasn't quite ready for that, but she stood close enough that she could see the hope and fear battling in his eyes. "I'm angry at you. I'm hurt. I'm going to need time to process all of this and figure out if I can trust you again. But I also understand now that you weren't just blowing me off. You were dealing with something real and scary and you didn't know how to handle it." She took a deep breath before continuing. "My cousin tried to take her own life when I was in college. I watched my aunt fall apart. I saw how the whole family struggled to know what to say or how to help. So I get it. I understand how hard this is, and I'm angry you didn't tell me, but I also understand why you didn't." His eyes widened. "You never mentioned that." "Because it's not exactly casual conversation," Rachel said, "and because everyone in my family pretends it never happened now. But I remember. I remember visiting her in the hospital and not knowing what to say. I remember how scary it was and how helpless everyone felt. The next morning, Rachel woke up on the couch with a blanket draped over her. She'd fallen asleep there after talking with him until almost 3 in the morning. He'd slept on the floor beside the couch, as if he was afraid she'd leave in the middle of the night if he wasn't there to see it. The apartment was quiet except for the sound of coffee brewing in the kitchen. She sat up slowly, her body stiff from the uncomfortable sleeping position. Her overnight bag was still by the door where she'd left it, a reminder of how close she'd come to walking away forever. Part of her wondered if she should have. If staying was the smart choice or just the easy one. But another part of her, the part that had listened to him talk about his sister's struggle for hours last night, knew that some situations didn't have simple answers. He appeared in the doorway holding 2 cups of coffee, looking like he hadn't slept at all. His eyes were red and puffy, his hair sticking up in every direction. He handed her a cup, made exactly the way she liked it, and sat down in the chair across from her. The distance between them felt important somehow, like they both needed space to figure out what came next. "I called the treatment center this morning," he said quietly. "I talked to Katie's therapist. I told her I'd told you everything. And I asked if it would be okay for you to visit. She said she'd talk to Katie about it and let me know." Rachel wrapped her hands around the warm coffee cup, letting the heat seep into her palms. "What if she says no?" "Then we respect that," he said. "This has to be her choice. But I hope she says yes. I hope she understands that letting you in might actually help all of us." They sat in silence for a while, both lost in their own thoughts. Rachel kept replaying the past 6 months in her mind, seeing all those moments through a different lens now. The time he'd snapped at her for asking too many questions about his day. The evening she'd found him crying in the bathroom, and he'd blamed it on a sad movie. The countless nights he'd stayed up late, staring at his phone with a worried expression she'd mistaken for boredom. "I saw a therapist for a while," Rachel said suddenly. "After my cousin's attempt, I was having panic attacks and couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about all the signs I might have missed, wondering if I could have done something to prevent it. It took me months to understand that it wasn't my fault, that sometimes people are fighting battles we can't see." He looked up at her with surprise. "You never told me any of this." "We both kept secrets," Rachel said, meeting his eyes. "Maybe not the same kind, but I wasn't exactly an open book either. I think we both got comfortable showing each other the easy parts and hiding the complicated ones." His phone buzzed on the coffee table. He picked it up, read the message, and his whole body seemed to relax slightly. "Katie wants to meet you. She said she's tired of hiding too. Her therapist thinks it might actually be good for her to see that her situation doesn't have to be this shameful secret." Rachel felt her stomach flip with nervousness. "When?" "Tomorrow afternoon. Visiting hours are from 2 to 4 on Saturdays. We can go together if you want." He paused, looking uncertain. "Or I can understand if you need more time, if this is all too much too fast." Rachel thought about it. 24 hours ago, she'd been ready to walk out of his life forever. Now she was agreeing to meet his sister in a mental health treatment facility. It was fast, maybe too fast. But something told her that if she was going to give this relationship another chance, she needed to jump in completely. No more surface-level conversations, no more pretending everything was fine when it wasn't. "I'll go," she said. "But I need you to promise me something. No more secrets. I don't care how hard or complicated or messy something is. If it's affecting you, it's affecting us, and I deserve to know about it. We're supposed to be partners, and partners show up for each other's real lives, not just the pretty parts." He nodded, and she could see the relief flooding through him. "I promise. No more secrets. And I'm going to start seeing a therapist, too. I realized last night that I don't actually know how to ask for help. I've spent so long being the strong one, the reliable one, that I never learned how to admit when I'm drowning." They spent the rest of the day just being together in a way they hadn't been in months. They talked about his sister, about what to expect at the treatment center, about how he'd been coping with the stress of keeping such a big secret. Rachel told him more about her cousin, about the guilt she'd carried, about how her family's silence around the topic had made everything harder. By the time night came, they were both exhausted, but something had shifted between them. The distance that had been growing for months felt smaller somehow. Not gone, but smaller. Rachel still slept on the couch, still needed that physical reminder that they were rebuilding, not just going back to how things were. But when she woke up in the middle of the night with anxiety about the next day, he was there with water and a calm presence that reminded her why she'd fallen in love with him in the first place. The drive to the treatment center the next afternoon was quiet. Rachel watched the scenery pass by, trying to prepare herself for what she was about to see. She'd looked up information about the facility online. It was a well-respected place that specialized in helping young adults with depression and thoughts of self-harm. The website showed bright, clean rooms and smiling staff members, but Rachel knew that behind those carefully composed photos were real people dealing with real pain. They parked in the visitor lot and sat for a moment before going in. "You don't have to do this," he said, reaching over to take her hand. It was the first time they'd really touched since the night she'd almost left, and his hand felt warm and familiar in hers. "Yes, I do," Rachel said, squeezing his hand. "If we're going to make this work, I need to understand your whole life, not just the easy parts."